Let's get started then. So, first of all, everybody, welcome to the webinar tonight. We're really pleased to have special guests with us, Ethan Lye and his mum Vera as well. Just a little bit of a background. So I'm going to be hosting each week. My name's Ryan Henry. I'm a former professional tennis player and managing director of Voyager Tennis Academy. And each week our aim is to bring you some really interesting insights, education, and so you've got some takeaways that you can learn from there. I guess the format of tonight is going to be around a 20 to 30 minute conversation between Ethan, Vera, and myself, followed by an opportunity for everybody to ask questions at the end. What we're going to do to start with here is we're just going to show a really quick video which shows a little bit about the Ethan's journey and his academy experience in Australia. And so I'm going to bring up on the screen now in a second. It goes for around 2 minutes. I'm going to play that to give you perspective.
What's stopping you? Are you too tired? Didn't get enough sleep? Don't have enough energy? Don't have enough time? Is that what's stopping you right now? Is that the thing? Or is the thing that's stopping you, you? Excuses sound best to the person that's making them up. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Recognize the excuses are not valid. They are lies. They are conjured up. They are fabricated. And the truth is, you have the time. You have the skill. You have the knowledge and the discipline to get it done.
The fruit of everything good in life. Begin with a challenge. It's always going to be difficult. If you want it, you got to go get it. This is your chance. This is your shot. This is your moment. This is your time. This is your place. And this is your opportunity.
All right, I'm not sure how everybody found that video. It's actually looked like it wasn't as in video mode. Did you find that, Vera? It just sort of, maybe it was the connection with the other people online, but we are, it was a little bit of a background anyway of I guess the experience that Ethan has had at the Academy in Sydney, and you saw Michael Zhang in that video as well, who was on a webinar last week. So a little bit of a background here on Ethan's tennis achievements. So he's been the #1 player in Singapore. He's won the Singapore Open at the age of 14, which I think he's the second youngest player ever to do that. He's won multiple international tournaments, winner of 2 ITFs. He was the #1 player for the winning Australian School Championship team. And he's been offered a number of fantastic US college tennis scholarships at some great universities as well. So Vera, Ethan's mum, is played an absolutely critical role as a parent, as all parents do, in helping Ethan along his journey. A little bit of a background on the family with Ethan and Vera is that they basically at the age of 11, Ethan moved to Thailand to pursue his tennis at an academy over there. At the age of 13, Vera, Ethan and his sister migrated out to Australia to basically go to the Voyager Academy in Sydney and the McDonald College program. So the families, I guess, has made some really significant sacrifices to achieve some of the success that Ethan's had. It's been a pleasure working with Vera and Ethan over the last 5 or 6 years in Sydney, and really appreciate you guys both coming onto the call. I'm sure there's a lot of things that the parents and players can get out of tonight. So I'll kick off with the first question for you, Ethan. And so you had a lot of success as a junior. What did your schedule look like when you were in Singapore prior to leaving at the age of 11? How many hours did you train a week? What was your setup?
Yeah, sure. I would say the hours that I was training was around 10 hours a week, which was not bad at that age. But I think the main problem for me was I would say the amount of different coaches I had at the time. So I had different coaches from training on evenings on Tuesday and Thursdays to having different private lessons, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, which I think which is what I needed overseas, was the structure where it was mostly in one place, which was what Thailand and Sydney had as well. So
yeah, nice mate. And like obviously some pretty huge sacrifices there. Vera, from your perspective as a parent, I was saying to you before, I can't imagine doing that as a parent in terms of moving overseas for my child's ambitions or sport. But you guys made that sacrifice as a family. What went through your mind when you made the decision, I guess, first to go to Thailand and then secondly to move out to Australia, which is probably a bigger step from where you live in Singapore?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of both. It was a push and pull thing, right? So the push factors were obviously, like what Ethan said, the lack of structure, the lack of consistency, and just too many voices in his head at that age. And we couldn't find one place where he could, we thought he needed. And at the same time, we were given offers overseas for scholarships and suggestions that we should move him. So it was both. And then at the age 11, as Singaporean parents would know, was very close to PSLE year. And we just knew the pressure, the academic pressures were going to be just too great to balance out with his tennis and at the level that he wanted to play, even at a young age.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan, can I just jump in with the training schedule and stuff when I was in Singapore? I think also in Singapore before I moved to Thailand, I think one of the major difficulties I had was getting matches in. And at that time, I would play just four tournaments a year. That was like the Specs tournament, which is only 4 times a year. And if I was winning, let's say I was winning the tournament, that would only be 7 singles matches per tournament. And I think that's an issue that I was struggling in Singapore that I now realize.
Just wasn't getting enough matches. Yeah, that's definitely true. And if, obviously, when you start out, you lose in first round, you wait another 4 months to play your next match. Yeah. Whereas, for example, now in Australia, he would be playing, every other weekend and, 7 matches in one weekend. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure whether it's my line or not, but Ethan's line seems a little bit fuzzy at times. Is that the same for you, Vera, or is that just my line?
No, I see him okay. I don't know about the rest.
Okay. Okay. No, all good there. And I guess just a question for you, Ethan, in terms of, you have had some great success as a player and achieved some really great things in your career so far. What would you put down a lot of your progress towards? What helped you achieve that?
I would say the environment that I was in, especially in Sydney, which is where I had most of my success, was definitely being around great coaches was one, as well as being surrounded by other great players. I would travel to tournaments to like Melbourne and Brisbane and whatnot, and I would play against some of the top juniors in Australia. And I think that really allowed me to see the level which I was at and where the top juniors, and not only in Australia but in the world, was at the time, and that really gave me something to work towards. I think that was one of the I'll say factors for me working as hard as I did, was seeing the level that I was at, and that really allowed me to push and get to that level. And I would also say was the amount of matches I played wasn't quite there yet, but I was able to learn how to win, and I think that's something that Luke, you and Adam and the other coaches taught me as well, was how to play the game rather than just training to lose rather than training to win, just finding ways to win during the match. And I think that really helped me in my matches and my tournaments.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Australia is being a really strong tennis nation. Most age groups do have players that go through to the professional level, almost every age group. It's really interesting what you say. I mean, it is one of the, from all the research that we did when we put together our book, with over, I think we ended up getting over 150 case studies of it. The strongest correlation of success was the number of matches that a player competed in. And your experiences there in terms of going out to Australia, seeing the next level up, I guess it does provide that next level of inspiration for you to go out there and work harder. When you're in an environment where you're the biggest fish in a small pond, so to speak, there isn't as much motivation than coming out to Australia, and getting beaten by some of the best players. So, when you get to that practice court, you got a lot of work to do. Did that sort of resonate for you, that was a key part of why you got more motivated and trained harder as well?
Yeah, for sure. I also had a lot of my peers who I'm good friends with, like Rinky. I'm not sure if most of you guys know him, but Rinky was like 7th in juniors in singles.
In the world, yeah.
In the world, and he's currently now playing in UNC in college. And he was, top 10 junior in the world and number 1 in Australia. And I would sometimes train alongside him, and that really, just seeing the level that he was at, really pushed me to get to where he was. And I would say also with a bunch of other guys like that I would see play in Australia who are now pretty good friends with. I would say that's one of the big factors for the reason why I had my success. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. The peers that you surround yourself with will always have an absolutely huge impact on how far you go in the game and everything like that. And maybe just to flow on from there, Ethan, on the back of, I guess, graduating from high school, you've had some great opportunities at US College now as well. So you did a visit last year to some colleges. Do you want to talk through a little bit about your experience of when you went over there, what you saw, and what are some of the things that that you got out of it, and where to from here in college?
Yeah, I think we visited around 7 colleges in the States, so that's quite a fair amount. And I think the biggest standout for me was the amount of the facilities there and how much they supported the athletes. Not just tennis, but football, basketball, and every sport that was there. The facilities were just a joke, really. They didn't just support them through athletics as well. They really supported the athletes and the academic side as well, I would say.
Yeah.
That was a big highlight as well. I mean, that photo in the top left, the coach is just showing me the lockers. I think he was trying to show off one of the key factors that he was trying to show me was that there was a rack there, that any racket you put in there, next morning, it will be in your locker, strung and just fresh with stenciled and everything.
Nice. That's pretty awesome level of service there. And you're also saying before the call too, you've got fingerprint recognition to get into the places. And
yeah. So to get into and this is just the tennis facility. I mean, it's even bigger in football and basketball, but just in the tennis facility, to get into every room was through thumbprint. So each player had their own thumbprint to get into the locker rooms, showers, the Xbox room where they play PS4 at Xbox and watch game film. And yeah, it's just unreal.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the college that you've been offered a full scholarship at is worth a huge amount, probably $200,000 over a 4-year period. Furman, that's the one I understand you're really keen on, and that has a great track record as well for producing professional players as well, right? Is that one of the big things that attracted you to Furman?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing for me was the coach. I think when I went to the States and visited a bunch of colleges and coaches, I think I met a bunch of different types of coaches. One being JJ, who's the Furman coach. He was really interested in me as a player and wanting to develop me to be a better player. That's how he kind of sold his program to be about. And there were some coaches who was just really interested about winning. So they weren't really interested in my character or whatever. They were just interested in, will you win for us? That kind of thing. And that really kind of just turned me away, I think. I think Furman was felt more at home. The players were really close together. And some other colleges, I felt the vibe that they each wanted to kill each other to an extent, because they're all fighting for spots to keep their scholarship as well. And Furman is a 4-year guarantee. So even with injury or not performing well, they'll stick to the scholarship. Which I think was a big highlight as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the you were just mentioning before that I guess one of the big attractive or key points that a lot of the colleges spoke about was one of the wins you had in your ITF history there. Do you want to quickly go through that? Yeah.
So in terms of what the coaches were looking for me, or what they were talking to me about, was they obviously realized that my UTR wasn't at the level that they were recruiting. So I mean, the colleges that I was seeing, the level of UTR was quite high, but they were more interested in my hit-to-hits. So they realized that I could play at a really high level. So I had a win over Holgerun, who 2 months after beating him, he became the world number 1 in juniors. So winning French Open, 2 grade 1s, and then winning the year-end championships. So that was the center of the conversation most of the time. It's just how was the match? How did you do it? I also see you've had big wins against players like top juniors in Australia, and you have winning rackets against them. So I think despite my relatively low ITF ranking and UTR, they were quite interested in me because of the hit-to-hits that I had. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize is the opportunities you get when you play those big players.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I guess maybe to pass it over to Vera now. So I know early on you guys maybe as a family weren't necessarily thinking that the US college pathway was something that you considered, but as time went along, it sounds like that you all thought about the options. I mean, from a parent's perspective, Vera, what are the things that attract you for your child to go to a US college?
Yeah, I think that was right. I mean, in the beginning, we didn't really know much about the college pathway, and even when we were in Thailand, I remember the American coach there was more sort of education can wait, you know, go through the pros, and so I think it was probably not until we got to Australia, and then we just had more exposure to the college pathway idea, and then we attended seminars that you guys organized, and so it was all that, and then self-study that we realized. And then when we learned more about the college pathway, it was it was kind of a very easy decision. It was a no-brainer. I mean, and also at this point you start to realize that the pro circuit is not easy, and you got to hit what, Ethan, was it top 100 before you even make any money? So we knew that he needed that backup, right? I mean, the education piece was very critical, whether or not he plays the pros, and I think that's still his design, his dream. But we know right now that he's going to have a college education at the end of it. So, and I think that was the messaging that he got himself through Luke and his coaches constantly, that was the right thing to do, and that was probably the best thing to do. And then through the years, then we just started pursuing it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. When I grew up playing, when I was around 18, I never had any conversations from any of my coaches suggesting to go down the college pathway. It was probably a real regret of mine that I didn't pursue that, because I did have some friends that did go, and they had the time of their lives and got an education and things like that. But it's interesting now in Australia, I guess the last probably 7 or 8 years, I guess towards the start of when we first created Voyager Tennis Academy, there weren't many parents. It's very similar, I guess, to Singapore. There weren't many parents that knew anything about it, and there weren't many players that really were thinking about even going. And then all of a sudden, I remember it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, the first couple of players went to college, and then everybody, like almost all the players from there, once they saw the experiences and they'd see these players come back from college raving about how good it was. They could see the confidence in their children. They could see so many good things about it. And I suspect it might be the same for Singapore as well. Is over time, once a couple of people go there and come back and talk about it and spread the word, that it's going to be a really common pathway. I think we're up above 50 now. 50 of our program graduates in colleges in the US, and it's really a great opportunity. So and maybe just another a follow-up question for you, Vera, just to change the tax a little bit, is just around Ethan's a really well-rounded individual. Great kid, great work ethic. He's got a lot of really good personal and strong personal qualities that you'd want in somebody. And what are some of the things, I guess, that you did? We know that parents play such a huge influence on their child's character development and who they become. What role do you think you guys played as parents in that?
Yeah, I mean, in everything a child does, whether it's sports or academics, there's always the parent support that plays a huge role. But I won't take, obviously, all the credit for it. I mean, there was a lot of input from his coaches, even his peers, just being around good people that has shaped him. And really just the sport itself. I think the sport of tennis has shaped him. Things that I couldn't teach him as a parent, he learned on the court at a very young age, dealing with pressure, dealing with losses, losing graciously. And, it was as much a learning journey for myself as it was for him, I think. And I don't think I would be the parent I am if you hadn't been on this journey as well. But yeah, I mean, in terms of support, it was really just doing the things that all parents do, and just, but feeding him and waking him up in the morning and getting him to school and, all those kind of things, but also just sort of being really in tune with what his aspirations were and being close enough where you understand those things, so that we all have our own aspirations as well. That's natural, I think, but we have to consciously not push our agenda above his, and try and sync up with his agenda, you know, and sync up with his aspirations, and then it's just supporting him through that, you know. And
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that we've found over the years, is that when you have a really healthy child parent relationship, and you have, you know, some great outcomes at the end of that, it is often because the child has a goal or a dream and the parents support that dream. It's sometimes when the other way around that things, you sort of see some of those headline news stories around you know, the Bernard Tomics of the world, or the Elena Dockics, where you have the parents' goal driving the child, you know, which is, you know, in some ways you can achieve some of those goals if you force your child to do enough training. Sure, they can become good players, but it's often at the huge expense of a fractured relationship. Often you can see there's, you know, psychological damages as well and things like that. So it's I see a really healthy, balanced perspective that you guys have taken with Ethan, and you know, you don't produce a character like Ethan, you know, without doing a lot of really good things in that space. So I think you guys have done a great job with Ethan there. And Ethan, what's your perspective been, mate, from the role that I guess your parents have played in your journey as a tennis player? How did you feel supported throughout that time?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, I would not be where I am today without my family. And as you know, like some of the big players or whatever, they say that they would not be where they are without their family unit, helping them keep sane and, you know, whatnot. And I think they've really helped recognize my aspirations and dreams, and I think that they've really helped me pursue that, especially from a young age. They've always supported me through that, through tennis. And I would say, especially as a kid, I think it's really important to have your parents guide you. And I wouldn't have seen it back then, but now looking back, they played a massive role into the person who I've become, just through guiding me and being there for me. And yeah.
Nice, mate. That's a nice message. You know that your mum's on the call, you really can't say anything otherwise, right?
And I won't cry.
yeah, exactly. And probably just the final question for you, Vera. You guys have, you know, you've spent the first, I guess, 11 years of Ethan's life in Singapore in the tennis environment there. You spent 2 years in Thailand. You've come back to you've come out to Australia, spent 5 or so years in Australia, and then Ethan's obviously back in the army now in Singapore. What messages, I guess, or what advice would you give to Singapore parents around how to approach the journey if they are based in Singapore at the moment, in terms of, you know, now that there is I guess, you know, it's fortunate that Voyager now is in Singapore and trying to have a really good impact on juniors and the pathway, and giving people opportunities to go to college and things like that. But yeah, what advice would you have for parents and players?
Yeah, I mean, I you know, in even initiating the idea of Voyager being in Singapore was actually mooted because I realized that, you know, not a lot of people can do what we did, or are able to, and but I knew that it was something that a lot of players do desire as well. Now with Voyager here, I feel like there is a possibility of doing what we did, or achieving what Ethan has achieved locally. And I think it makes a lot more sense, obviously, you know. And so I would say, I mean, if you have the opportunity and the matching aspirations to pursue tennis to college or to the pros, go for it, you know. And I mean, I think in Singapore IB, I do recognize the academic pressures are still going to be there. We can't change that overnight. We can't take that away. And that's something that we didn't really have to deal with at the same level in Australia. But I think with enough planning and structure and discipline, obviously, and motivation, the right motivations, it can be done. And I hope we will see more people, you know, go through the college pathway if that's what they want to do, and be able to achieve that.
Yeah, nice. Nice. Well, no, it was great having this conversation with you guys. We will open it up to some questions to people in a moment. But yeah, no, just wanted to say, yeah, I guess it's great to see you guys go through that journey, and at the end of it, actually having an amazing outcome, which is, you know, that Ethan has been offered a huge scholarship into a college. Will get great 4 years there as well. But I think in some of the conversations that we've had in the past, I mean, I think from your perspective, Vera, you rate the journey as just important as the end outcome, you know, that you guys
yeah.
are, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think generally Singaporeans are not known to be real risk takers. And you know, when we left when he was 11, there were a lot of critics, obviously, to our decision, and also questions about how we knew that this was, how we guaranteeing success, you know, in this huge risk that we took. And I said, well, we can't, you know, but to us, the success is in the journey, and we measured our success along the way. It's not just about the end point. And I think seeing Ethan where he is now, and, you know, of course the college scholarship is really nice, but just seeing him as a person, and, you know, the confidence he has and the experiences that he's had, I mean, to us, that's the success already. So whatever comes after that is just a bonus and the icing on the cake. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ryan, we do have polling questions, don't forget.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was just about to get into.
Okay.
So what we'd love to do is Vera's going to put a couple of questions up on the screen just to get a polling of just around a couple of questions there, just to help us, I guess, provide a better service and also influence some of the webinars that we might have coming up and some of our content. So yeah,
the first question is, I don't know why it's not showing up completely, but it's about how much do you know about the college pathway? All right, we're just gonna wait a bit so that people can vote. Let me get it up to 50% and I'll shut it. Good. Very little, Ryan. You've got work to do.
Okay, yeah, sounds like it.
Okay, we'll go to the second one.
I guess that could also be framed as, yeah, does your child have aspirations to pursue US college, or as a parent, are you interested in them pursuing that pathway as well?
Yeah. Okay, we're getting good responses, a lot of responses for this. I'll just wait it out a bit. Okay.
Okay, that's a pretty fair result there. So half the people.
Yeah. I mean, since they don't know a lot about it, I assume that would be the obvious answer.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can change that.
Yep.
Okay, we have a couple more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Go for it.
You can do multiple answers for this one. Challenges that you guys face. What's your guess for this one, Ryan?
I don't know. I'm actually looking at the fourth response there of lack of quality elite coaching. Hopefully we're not getting too many of those responses, but we are. Yeah.
Well, that could be historical as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, academic balance. I think that's what we would have anticipated.
Yeah.
Okay. And so finally, we have a unanimous one.
It's really interesting. If we had done this 7 or 8 years ago in Australia, this would have been, I think, very, very similar results of people not yet knowing enough. And
okay, Ryan.
Yep. Okay. Yes. Okay. That's great, because I'll talk about this at the very end of the webinar as well. Is that for next week, I guess I anticipated that there may be a lot of interest around wanting to know more. Next week on the webinar, we have Chris Bates, who's the founder of Study and Play USA. They've probably recruited the majority of our students in Australia to colleges in the US. They've placed probably 300 to 400 students into colleges, and Chris himself was a college player, and he loved his experience so much that he started a business around helping people go to college. So, next week, same time, what we're going to do is we're going to have Chris present on that. Similar sort of style, it'll be a conversation style, and Chris will basically provide a lot of information around almost everything that you need to know about college in about, let's call it 40 minutes, with an opportunity to ask him questions as well at the end. So that'll be on.
Yeah, and Chris was. I was just going to say that his seminars were the ones that actually got us started on the college pathway, knowledge acquisition, or whatever you call it. So yeah, that should be good. Ryan, I can pick up the questions for you guys because I've seen it. Ethan, there's a question for you. How do you deal with pressure during matches, and did you like Australia or Thailand?
Oh, right. Pressure. I remember this, Michael was asked this. For me, I loved pressure. I think those are the moments that we train for, and pressure moments are the defining moments in tennis, I would say. So I really embraced myself in those moments and trusted my training that I would do the right things. And I just loved playing those points, the pressure points. And then what Michael said in his previous one was, accepting that, this isn't everything, that, it's okay and stuff like that. That comes after the match for me. But I would say for me, dealing with pressure was fun. And I would say I enjoyed those moments, and that enabled me to play those points better. And Thailand and Sydney are really different. I enjoyed both, but for me, Sydney is obviously the better place for me.
Ethan, that's the correct answer, mate.
Yeah.
That's because Ryan's on the call. Ryan, do you want to take this one? The question is, how expensive is it to play tournaments in Australia? And are the tournaments only played on weekends?
Yeah, the majority of tournaments, so the tournament schedule in Australia, where there is a tournament schedule, obviously right now we've got the coronavirus in place and there is a lot less. But so the tournaments are typically played during the school holidays in Australia. So often they'll be back-to-back, probably you can usually play about 4 to 5 tournaments in a sort of 2-week block. And then other than that, during the school terms, they play them on the weekend. Often the first round starts on a Friday, and then it'll finish on a Sunday, sometimes a Monday. So that's the typical schedule. As far as the cost goes, if you're playing locally, say if you live in the city that you're playing in, so Sydney, you're looking at about an $70, $80 entry fee, and just your expenses in getting to the tournament. If you have to travel for the tournament, your accommodation costs go on top of that. So it might be $150, $200 a night, for the time that you go away. But the good thing about Australia is that there's a lot of tournaments if you live in one of the major cities, it can be reasonable in cost if you're playing them in your city. But there also is, I think, from the perspective of Singaporeans who come across for some of those training blocks, that we have had a lot in the past that do come over for the school holiday periods, and you can get a lot of matches in that time. It's having done that flight a few times myself, it's not too bad. It's an overnight flight to get here, and there's it's a great way to clock up a lot of matches in a short amount of time.
Okay, so while we're talking about tournaments, there's a question about, and Ethan, you can answer this one. What kind of tournaments do you play? Did you play more ITFs or UTR type matches or local matches?
I played more ITF matches, I would say. There were quite a few locally as well in Australia, which was good. But saying that, I would have probably wanted to play more Australian tournaments, which and all these are all UTR tournaments. They all contribute to the UTR, which is good. but majority of my matches were ITF matches. But the fact that playing ITS, meaning you have to travel a lot and stuff, I didn't get the matches that I wanted to. So looking back, I would have probably tried to play more Australian matches. Yeah.
So there are several questions about tennis and national service. How you're planning to balance that, Ethan?
Oh, that's a tough one. At the moment, mostly just trying to play on weekends, but with the circuit breaker, nothing at the moment. But I'm hoping to get onto a sportsman's game, which should allow me to train almost every day. And yeah, hopefully I'll get to play in the Davis Cup and other Singapore representing tournaments, which should be fun, hopefully.
Okay, one more question about tournaments. You shared a lot about tournaments and playing in many of them. Is it realistic to have that many tournaments in a small country like Singapore? Ryan, would you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I know I know our plans are to, certainly in the program, to create a lot of match play opportunities. When we first started the programs at Heartbeat, we did have a match play day on the Friday, and we did run into some court restrictions that we basically had to work through. We were working through before the coronavirus started. So we are opening up more match play opportunities. We just had to seek some other venues, I guess, around Singapore. One of the types of match play events that we are looking to run are more ratings match play events, which basically the challenge that most people have, it doesn't matter whether you're from Australia or Singapore, is that if you play age group matches all the time, you'll play against the same players over and over and over again. The advantage of having ratings match play events, and I know the Singapore Tennis Association are talking about using the ITF rating system. We've been talking about the UTR, and hopefully they just land on some rating system. The advantage of that is that you actually play events which aren't limited to age or gender. And so you'll end up getting a far greater variety of matches there. So yeah, it absolutely is possible in Singapore. I know we'd like to work with the STA more closely to produce a more rigorous sort of training circuit. The other thing about Singapore as well is that there are some really good opportunities really close by in some of the neighbouring countries like Indonesia and Thailand, and that where there are some tournaments. And I know we originally had some plans to do some trips there, but you know there are some good good opportunities to play also quite locally in some relatively short flights or short distances away there as well. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, there were some questions for me about our move and our decisions to move. We addressed some of that in the talk, but when we decided to send him and how we came to the decision, I think it like I said, it was push and pull. We had offers for him to train overseas on scholarships, so that was attractive to us. But also, as I said, the age he was at, moving towards PSLE, we had actually had an arrangement with his school. He was an SGI at that time, to take him out of school 2 days a week. So they allowed us that for a year or so. But then when he came closer to the PSLE year, they started to get nervous and wanted us to go back to full-time in school, and we just couldn't find the right balance for him, and so that's probably when we decided it was time to move. Yeah, so hope that answers that as well. Ethan, there's just a question about when you got your first ITF points. I know that's a big question, like how do you break into the ITF circuit? It's always a tricky one. You want to?
My first ITF points were here actually. I played I think, yeah, I got a wild card into the Singapore ITF, and then I made semis, so I got my first ITF points then. But yeah, I had to beat Ali Miraj, which I think some people know him, to get my first points. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, some questions about gym. When did you start going to the gym? At what age did you do that?
That's not for Ryan, right? That's for me.
Yeah. Well, Ryan's free to answer that as well.
I can give you an answer, but yeah, you go. You, mate.
Yeah. I would say in Sydney, I would start going to the gym when I was in year 7 So that was around 13 years old. But purely probably mostly body weight stuff with a personal trainer. But I probably started getting into gym like with weights maybe at 15 years old. Yeah. Fully getting into weights and stuff. Yeah.
I think related to that, there's a question about injuries. So question is, Ethan, did you get any serious injuries in the past few years, and how did you deal with them? And then after that, Ryan, some advice for younger players about injuries.
Yeah, sure.
Ethan?
Well, I would say these weren't big injuries. I would say these were more growing pain injuries in Thailand. I was training like something crazy from like 5 or 6 hours a day for 6 days a week, and I think my body was just breaking down. And in Sydney, I only had one big injury, but I would say that plays a big role. Is just the tournament planning and the training schedule and periodizing was really helpful in keeping my body healthy. But saying that, in that time that I did get the injury, I played too many tournaments in a row, and then started training too early right after those tournaments, and I ended up getting a stress reaction, which was in my shin, which is very close to a stress fracture. So I was out for like something from like 3-4 months. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to answer some questions there around the physical training side. So, I mean, one of the main goals of any physical training program or gym program is always about injury prevention. I mean, if you look at every player that ends up having a really high level of success, plays on the professional circuit, they've generally had years and years without injuries, because injuries do halt your progress a lot. So one of the first things we usually get athletes to do in Australia is undergo a physical screening or assessment, which basically outlines all the areas of an athlete's body that will experience will have a high risk of injury at some point due to usually a lack of flexibility or some sort of strength component. So most of the gym programs that tennis players now do are around, proofing their body against injuries is always the number one thing. You don't see too many players now, lifting heavy weights or doing anything like that. It's all about injury prevention. So usually, and if there is any weight training, it generally comes in from a little bit, as Ethan sort of suggested there himself, sort of 15, 16 years old, where your body actually responds to more resistance training. But certainly at a younger age group, as far as keeping in good shape, you can certainly, playing a lot of matches is a great way to stay tennis fit. And then you combine that with, your stretching, your flexibility, your core stability, and that any physical program that is designed to prevent injuries as well. I think in looking at the time there as well, what we might wrap it up there. Guys. So yeah, just wanted to say a huge thank you to Ethan and Vera tonight for coming on the call. As I said, you guys have been a pleasure to work with, and it's so good, I guess, for us to see not only that you had a great journey or experience of pursuing the elite tennis journey, but you also ended up with a fantastic outcome of achieving a huge US college scholarship. And Ethan, I'm sure once you're over there, you'll have an incredible life experience. You'll get a fantastic education, and it'll be something that'll set you up for life. Whether you decide you pursue the pro circuit directly after that and have success on the tour, or whether you pursue a career in tennis or something else, it's just going to be a great platform that'll give you so many options moving forward. So well done, congratulations, Ethan and Vera.
Sorry, I see a whole bunch of other questions, and I'll be happy, Ethan, I'm sure will be as well, to take the questions offline. So if you guys want to still continue talking to us about some of these concerns or questions you have, you can email us. I think through the link email there should be a email, and then we'll try and take this conversation offline as well. But thanks for coming on the webinar.
Yep. Definitely. Thanks, guys. And just a reminder, so next week we will have Chris Bates from Study and Play USA. He's going to basically, I think within that sort of 30 to 40 minutes, will give you everything that you'll need to know, all the basics that you'll need to know about the whole US college experience. So look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thanks again.
All right. Bye.